Middle Podcast, the podcast dedicated to the music, movies, and culture of Generation X.
What is up, Slackers? Welcome back to another episode of the Stuck in the Middle podcast. I am your host, Jason Eck. And this week, we are once again joined by Carlos Rivera as we continue to dig down into some of the music that we were listening to in the early 90s, really the early to mid 90s, particularly in the ska, hardcore, and punk scene. Really related to mostly the Northeast, Connecticut, Boston, and New York scenes. Some of the bands I'm sure you have heard of before, and some of them might be new to you. So please remember that I do have a Spotify playlist where I update it every week after the episodes drop with some of the music that we talk about, particularly if there's some unique and interesting things. This is a place to check it out. So, without further ado, we're going to jump right back into it. Hope you enjoy it.
In like that you could consider punk, hardcore, whatever, that got me going and got me going like full-fledged was it was either Mother's Milk, again, a Jamey Service thing. That dude, man, I owe so much of my musical taste to that guy based on like just, you know, I mean, it was either the Red Hot Chili Peppers Mother's Milk or
Freaky Styley.
Fugazi's 13 songs.
Okay.
Because I wasn't, I didn't immediately go back in the Chili Peppers catalog.
Gotcha.
I pretty much, when I listened to Mother's Milk, that was my jam, man. Like that was, you know, here is fast music with funk, with a dude singing that's rapping over the songs that they're singing, but it wasn't rap music. You know, it was the notorious stories of the dudes walking out on stage with socks on their junk, you know, the crazy hair, all that stuff. And like, it was just that album blew me away. And then Fugazi blew me away in a different way. Like, it was just, this was something that, like, unlike anything I had ever heard before. You know, the Chili Peppers, I had heard funk music and rock music. I didn't understand what Fugazi was, you know?
Yeah.
Especially, you know, the first Fugazi song that I heard, which is probably a lot of people's first song, is Waiting Room. Yeah. With that bass line, you know? And it just, that blew me away. You know, and with that, at the time with the skating videos was another thing that introduced us to a lot of different music. The West Coast stuff, which we weren't really exposed to. I mean, the Chili Peppers were West Coast, but they were bigger already at that time. When Mother's Milk came out, they were already they were big out West and in the Midwest. They were a bigger band.
They were already on EMI at that point. I mean, they were signed.
Yeah. Yep. And so this other stuff that I was listening to on the skate videos, man, like I remember going to Take One Video all the time, man. And like our friend Kurt Gannon, who he had mentioned, you went to Lollapalooza with. Yeah. We used to go to Take One Video and take out like the Powell Peralta movies and the H Street movies. And all these movies had punk rock music. Mm-hmm. And there were bands that I hadn't heard of before, you know, and there was a really cool record store. There was a couple back when record stores existed. And one of them was in New Haven, right upstairs from the York Street Cinema, called Rhymes Records. I don't know if you ever went there. You had Cutler's was there on the same street, but yeah, the movie theater, York Street Cinema or York Square Cinema, which was very well known to be showing art movies and every Friday and Saturday night.
Oh, Rocky Horror. Yeah.
Upstairs, there was a record store called Rhymes Records, which was a tiny record store that had all sorts of independent music and like imports and stuff. So a lot of these bands that I heard, because at the end of the skate videos, they'd have the credits.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd be like with a piece of paper and a pen and writing down the names of the groups. So I'd go to Rhymes Records, and the other store that was around, I mean, there was a couple of other ones in Connecticut, but the other one that I knew of that I used to go to was Phoenix Records in Waterbury.
Yeah.
That was a mecca for me. Like even as an adult in my 20s until they went out of business, I spent thousands and thousands of dollars there. Like it's insane.
See, I was just looking something up because I was trying to remember, because Moby is from Connecticut.
Yeah.
And he used to talk about a record store, and for a minute I had to go and look it up, but it's not. This was Dance Hall Records in Stamford, which is, I don't think I'd ever been there, but that's where he was getting like the 12 inches and, and all the independent stuff.
A punk rock man in his own regard. I mean,
absolutely.
He started off in punk rock, but yeah, so these were the record stores that I was, and then of course, Jamey Service, and then there was in high school we had Kayvon. Baramian was another one of the in that group that used to like listen to all that. The Toby Hamp,
Wilson
exposed me to and Wilson Muniz.
Yeah.
Those guys were all, and those guys were already going to shows. Like I didn't start going to shows until my junior year in high school. But so with the Chili Peppers, that was something they were a big influence in my musical tastes. And as you know, we got our first tattoos together.
Yes, sir.
The day before we graduated high school, and my first tattoo is that Chili Peppers.
Absolutely.
But then,
hey, there's no shame in that, and I will tell you right now, one of my, like, if I don't want to do a top 50 list, because maybe I'll do it for one time or another on the show, but "Knock Me Down" is one of my all-time favorite songs. One, it's a tribute to Hillel, but it's also just such a sophisticated tune. And it was probably the most sophisticated on Mother's Milk. That to me was definitely showing where they were going, because that was the first Frascati record. There would be no Blood Sugar Sex Magik without that evolution of that band and that record, which is so good.
It is, and it's funny because whatever people think about what the Chili Peppers have become, or what some of their, I'm not a fan of all their albums that they've come out with after Blood Sugar Sex Magik, but I'll tell you, man, like this last album that came out, they all did like individual. I'm a huge Frascati fan. I love John Frusciante, and especially with the Chili Peppers, I like his solo stuff. Not his first solo album when he was all strung out on heroin and everything. That's a sad listen. I own it, but that's a sad and very hard listen. But the rest of his solo stuff is really good, even his electronic stuff. But just the interviews, these guys are so unique, talented, every single one of them.
Yeah.
Talented. Frusciante was 18 when Mother's Milk was out, and he was playing in his favorite band, so he didn't have his sound yet.
Mm-hmm.
Blood Sugar Sex Magik is when that was when he was like starting to collaborate with the writing and this and this and this. And that album, especially when it dropped when we were seniors in high school, man, was like, and then it's Rick Rubin.
Yeah.
So again, a perfect, and the interviews were on Rick Rubin's, podcast thing, and just the joy in all of them talking about all the stuff together. And I like the new album. I don't know if it's nostalgia, and just I don't know, but it's just something about that I've been driving my wife crazy playing it whenever we're in the car.
I haven't listened to it yet, but they're all back together with Rick Rubin.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a winning formula.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, so I think at this, again, I keep bringing up Jamey Service, man, but like these bands that from FUGAZI, I went back and started listening. Oh, well, Ian MacKaye was in Minor Threat. So I got Minor Threat's the whole complete works or whatever it's called,
all in a single cassette.
I bought that at Strawberries, the old Strawberries on Broad Street.
Yeah,
and that led me to Bad Brains was another band that I don't think I think Wilson was the one who got me into Bad Brains. Either Wilson or Toby Hamp, one of those two guys, gave me a mixtape with Bad Brains. And then the other band that I owe Jamey Service so much for is the Circle Jerks.
Yeah.
That band, the album, wonderful. Jamey Service let me borrow that album, and that became my new love. It was Mother's Milk, and then when I heard that Circle Jerks Wonderful album, now that was different. That was not very technical. With the Chili Peppers, I knew these guys were they were good musicians.
Yeah, there's musicality.
Not to say that the Circle Jerks weren't bad musicians, but this was in your face, like no apologies, and just like I could relate. It's not that I could relate to the lyrics or this and that. There was something about it that I loved the way it made me feel. It was like an adrenaline rush.
Sure.
Adrenaline rush, and all these, like back in the day, we used to open up cassettes and go through the notes and the thank yous and this and that. And that's how we used to discover other bands.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to sound like that old man, get off my lawn, and whatnot. But kids don't know. Kids nowadays just don't know, man, with their playlists and stuff like that. God bless them, because I use it too. Spotify, I'll listen to something and it'll go into something in the same type of genre. But we used to have to do some work, man. We used to have to look and then go to the record store and look up at those bands, and not knowing what they sounded like half the time. We had to take some risks. Sometimes they were good, other times they were crap. And we were stuck with that album, which, wasn't cheap, like $10, $11. That's,
So what's funny is that the Circle Jerks, we're gonna put a pin in them for another episode that I want to do, because I'm sure they'll be on the list.
Yeah.
So we'll regather for another time with a very specific time frame. So I want to say Circle Jerks, that record, wonderful. That was 88 earlier.
Yeah, it was 80. It couldn't have been between 86 and 88.
All right.
Between 86 and 88.
So we'll pick, let's say, between 86, and it has to be before 2000. Maybe even, I don't know, we'll say 96. And we'll do an episode on favorite cover songs from that time period. Okay?
Yeah.
Because, and for anyone who hasn't listened to some of these bands that we've mentioned, a lot of the punk and hardcore independent bands covered all these kind of classic tunes. And there's a few of them that I can think of off the top of my head, but immediately when I think of the Circle Jerks, I do think of a cover that you very excitedly dude, you got to hear this. It's the Circle Jerks. You got to listen to this song, and it was amazing. So we'll keep a pin in that one. But what you mentioned, so going back to all the times that we talked about music, and much like what Jamey did for you, or Toby, and did for both of us, or whoever it was, you also turned me on to a lot of these things, because we kind of got into the whole, we got into actually sharing music, because I mean, that's what you did. So Jamey'd show you something and be like, hey dude, you got to hear this. But there's one band